welcome to Harmonies of Success. I'm Brendan O'Neill. I am the founder of Music Kids Academy, always on a mission to inspire young minds through music. I am sat on the Music Kids couch with Captain James Marshall. Hello, Captain Marshall.
Hello, good morning.
So, for the rest of the interview, I will be calling you boss, because of course you are my boss, but we have known each other for more years than probably you care to remember.
A lot of years, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Goes back probably 36, 37 years, probably.
Something like that, yeah. So I was 8 years old. I could barely blow a trumpet.
Yeah.
And now I'm 45.
I could barely blow a trumpet.
There we go, there we go.
You set them up.
And so, sir, you have got to be one of the head figures, the best known people in the core of army music today.
That's very kind to say, and I don't know how true that is, but certainly I spent a long time within army music as a regular army musician before becoming a reservist 2 years ago when I retired from regular service. So I've been around army music for a long time. I am well known for that fact, I suppose, really. But yeah, in my world, I suppose, there's a little bit of infamousy.
Infamous is a better word. Yeah. We won't call it fame. And it's so. Can you share with us how your journey as a musician led to pursue a career in armed forces as eventually a director of music, a major and a director of music?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like back in the sort of the 1970s and 1980s, and I've shown my age slightly now. When music was within schools a lot more than it is now. At the age of 5, I was given a recorder, like many musicians are at school, young musicians, and I was a part of the school choir, my primary school. I was really lucky that I had a teacher there, a lady called Mrs. Pomfrey, who saw at that point something in me that was obviously showing an element of natural ability. I don't think you say talent at that point, but certainly ability. So then at the age of 7, I was asked if I wanted to go and audition to try and play the trombone. And I thought that was amazing. So let's go and do that. So I walked through the door, and there was this chap by the name of Mr. Reese sat there, took one look at me and said, "You're too small. Arms aren't long enough, you're just too small."
Nothing's changed.
No, absolutely. And here I am, not much bigger. But he pointed over in the corner and said, "But you can play that." And there in the corner was a French horn. I had no idea what this was, but there was lots of brass, and it looked quite fun. So I said yes. And I took that instrument away. I'll be honest with you, it was almost as big as me at the time. My mum designed a trolley to put it on so I could actually walk to school and drag it along with me. So that's when the music sort of started. Then when I was 8 years old, I'm from Romford in Essex originally, and the Romford Carnival took place every year around about June time, and Mum took me and my sister to the end of the road where the carnival used to pass.
Yeah.
And the carnival was full of floats and majorette troops, but there were some bands as well. And this one band marched past in green and gold, making, at the time, what I thought was this fantastic sound. And it was a fantastic sound. And it blew me away. It was a youth military marching band. It really blew me away. And I said to my mum at the time, I want to join that organisation. And about a year and a half after that, I joined the Romford Drum and Trumpet Corps. So then, I continued with music at school. I was having lessons, weekly lessons, individual lessons, with said Mr. Reese when I was at primary school, and then that changed when I moved into secondary school. But I continued that whole musical piece, and I was in the Romford Drum and Trumpet Corps, and it was that. Joining that band, that youth marching band, that just sold me on the music, the type of music, and actually a career going forward. I always, every year, I would watch Trooping the Colour on the television. I'd watch the Festival of Remembrance. I'd watch the Lord Mayor's show. I watched all these things with bands in it. And then with the Romford Band, I took part in the Lord Mayor's show. And it was just, as I was going into my teenage years, I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do as I get older. I just want to keep doing this. I want this hobby to just actually become a career. And so when I was 15, my father took me to the local Army Careers Office, and we walked through the door, and I wanted to join the Grenadier Guards band. That was my thing, if you like. And I walked in, and I said to this chap, who happened to be wearing a Royal Anglian uniform, I said I'd like to join the army as a musician, which stunned him, I think, in the first place. And then I said I want to be in the Grenadier Guards, and this has plagued me most of my life. He said, "You're too short," and that was the end of my foot guard career. And at which point he pointed at a poster on a wall which said, you could be one of these three, which was the Queen's Regiment, the Royal Regiment Fusiliers, or the Royal Anglians, who I subsequently found out later was all regiments within the Queen's Division, which was his division, And I saw this lovely cap badge with a feather hackle in it, red and white feather hackle, and went, that'll do for me. I'll go there. So I had no connections to it. I had no military connections in my family.
No, okay.
Apart from a great uncle who served in the First World War, but neither of my grandfathers served in the war. They were, but one was too old. Second World War. One was too old, and one was a tool maker at Ford. So it was a protected trade, and used then to create machinery or weaponry for the war effort. So I didn't have any military background. So I then joined, and at the age of 16 I entered the army as a military musician, which was the dream come true. I literally took my hobby, one day this was my hobby, to the next day
getting paid for it.
I was getting paid for it, and it became a 34-year career.
Yeah, and you're still in it now as a reserve.
And I'm still in it as a reservist. Yeah. So when I retired 2 years ago from the regular army, and joining the reserve seemed the most obvious thing to do. Yeah. A job that I love and loved for all those years as a regular musician. Why would you not do it on a part-time basis? Yeah. For as long as I can, or as long as they'll have me. Yeah. So it was just that was a no-brainer. To be fair, an absolute no-brainer.
I want to touch on something that you actually mentioned earlier as well, and this is the idea of this podcast is the whole inspiring of young minds. And it certainly is not going to be political. I'm a firm believer that actually it doesn't really matter which party's in. It's up to us how we conduct our lives. Yeah. Now, but the point is that, and the point that you raised earlier is that when it comes to primary music education, I remember my primary school teachers. I had a Mr. Hignett in senior school who really inspired me to play. But before that, I had a Mr. Snowden in my middle school. We had a 3-tier system. And I've spoken recently by chance to the middle school that I attended in Haltwhistle, and they don't have the Northumberland County people in there to teach music anymore. And so it's given the fact that when you joined with my brother, there was loads of you. Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing you pass out. There was that parade square was full of musicians. Yeah. And last year we had less than 30 join the Corps of Army Music. Yeah. Does that raise a concern for you?
Oh, hugely, absolutely. And I think irrelevant, as you say, take the politics out of it, but irrelevant of whatever party are governing at the time. The reality is that back in the late 1980s, going into the 1990s, funding was removed for peripatetic music within schools, and that's had a huge effect. Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt, that's had a huge effect. And again, without getting political, this is purely my opinion. but we now find ourselves in a period of time where music is very much in danger of going back to being elitist,
yes,
and not available to all.
That's right,
and that is worrying. That is hugely worrying.
We're almost there because within teaching environments, within music teaching environments, we're in a position where music teachers need to make a living, and without the public funding and with the way that it is being privately funded, they're having to charge £45 an hour, especially those in London, if not more, to actually make a living and to live.
So I can remember when I was growing up, I came from a family that worked hard. My father didn't earn a lot of money. My mother actually earned more than my father. And bringing money into the household, we had enough but nothing spare. I think that's the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. You know, we were not poor by any means, and I would never ever try and say that we were. But we didn't have spare money particularly. And I can remember, so I had free French horn lessons at school. Mm-hmm. And then my parents paid for me to have piano lessons and music theory lessons. And I used to go to a lady around the corner into her, she had a grand piano in her dining room. And she was like, I actually went to school with her daughter. Annette Worley, her name was, not a daughter, the teacher, and she was another inspiration, but it cost £5 for an hour.
Yes,
and half an hour was piano and half an hour was music theory, and for my parents at the time that was a big deal, and I look back now and I am hugely grateful to them for, you know, £5 today is nothing. You know, you don't really think about £5 today. But back then, for my parents, £5 a week, that £20 a month, was quite a lot of money when we didn't have particularly spare money. And, you know, something else probably would have given way for that.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue we are in a similar position. We are, but everything is so much more expensive.
Yes.
You know, the cost of living is so much more expensive now than it was back then. And the availability, and you're right, you know, music teachers out there now, you know, they've got to make a living. It's got to be relevant in terms of cost. But as we all know, the arts are the first things to disappear when anybody is making a decision around their financial woes, if you like.
That's right.
You know, it's the arts and the social element of life that tends to disappear. So you go back, I mean, it is incredibly worrying. And you're right to pick up, you know, Army Music around within 30 people joined last year. I suspect more left than joint, and I don't mean that from a negative point of view. I just mean coming to the end of their contracts and things like that. I think, you know, it is hugely worrying, and for some reason now I think music as a whole, but certainly in the military, we are continually trying to rebrand, if you like, what we do to become more appealing to the wider audience when we're perhaps, you know, music's not available to them anyway.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
It's difficult to appeal to a forum of young people when music is less and less available to them coming through the education system.
So it just doesn't look relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So it's similar to, I mean, a lot of our listeners might enjoy the sort of sporting analogy. I grew up during, I mean, I don't like football. You do. No one's perfect. But during when I was younger, it was during when Kevin Keegan took over Newcastle United, and this guy basically converted everybody in my junior school into Newcastle United supporters. Before then, they would support Liverpool and Sunderland. All of a sudden, but what he did to fund the main team, he got rid of the grassroots from Newcastle United.
Yeah.
He got rid of the junior teams and the little kids and all this kind of thing. Australia have done a similar thing with their rugby. They've got rid of grassroots, and a little while ago, of course, England did the same thing. Yeah. Now we're in a position, sporting-wise, where Ireland, tiny little Ireland, are trouncing a lot of the world because of the fact that they've invested in grassroots. It's the same with music, isn't it?
It absolutely is. My worry is that, you know, that out there is this young Yehudi Menuhin who could be an absolute superstar, natural, stunning musician out there that we're going to miss, and they're not going to get that opportunity because it's not available to them. The Billy Elliots of the musical sort of practical musical world, we're going to miss.
Yes,
and that is worrying. Absolutely, yeah.
So you are in charge of cadet music.
I am, yeah. So Army Cadet music.
Yes.
That is my job. I'm employed by I'm employed by the Army Cadets Charitable Trust, and I manage music across the Army Cadet Force and the Combined Cadet Force Army sectors. Keeps me busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you must travel a lot, all over the country, really. Which is not new to you, because as the regional director of music, that was the title, wasn't it? Regional director of music.
That was one of my roles. Yeah.
Yes, that was everywhere except London, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. So,
of course, we know London is its own country, isn't it? So
in itself. Well, to be fair, the population is larger than many.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so I do travel quite a lot. That's not something that's new to me. You're right. You know, my previous job, I travelled a lot anyway. Even just as a musician within the army, there are great opportunities for travel. So I do travel a lot. I get around the country working with more working with the county levels rather than necessarily the young people. But you know, my job is to enable and support music in the ACF right over the country, and it's a really exciting job.
Yep.
I'm still getting my feet under the table a little bit. I've been there since July last year, so nearly a year. Trying to get out and see as many people as possible, because the biggest reason it comes back to, you know, partly why we're doing this podcast, is that the Army Cadet Force is one of, if not the largest organisations providing free musical tuition to young people.
Yes.
And my job is to continue expanding that, is to develop how we deliver that training, how we better support our volunteer adult quorum, because we are, you know, within music, within the ACF, we are 99% volunteer.
Yes.
I am the only full-time employee. So it, you know, there are a lot of challenges to it, and as with all these sort of things, I think we could do things better. But you know, when the opportunity came along to work for an organisation that is out there providing free music tuition to young people, I absolutely jumped to the chance.
Of course. And of course the Corps of Army Music now does benefit, certainly our band that I'm a part of, You Direct, has benefited from some young musicians coming through that system.
Absolutely. And that's a little bit of what I'm doing right now, actually, is there is a slight sort of training gap between the level of or standard, if you like, required to join the regular army or the reserve army, and where we're getting our cadets to at the end of their cadet experience.
Okay.
So I'm looking to develop that a bit, and of course it's not for everybody. You know, the thing about the cadets is we create an experience for a young person from the age of 12 to 18 that gives them life skills going forward. If at the end of that we're able to give someone that musical education that then employs them at the end. Wow, I mean, what could be better?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I've done a full 22 year, if not more, career, yeah. So with the cadets, do they get trained from grassroots, or do they have to have musical knowledge before they actually join?
No, they can join the cadets purely as a cadet to start with, and have no musical background whatsoever, and we will take them from absolutely those grassroots. Having never read music, you know, can't read music, they can't play an instrument, we'll provide the instrument, we'll provide the tuition, take them forward. And the goal in that 6 year period is to get to sort of around about that ABRSM grade 4 plus.
Yes.
Now, you and I know that, you know, to be a professional musician, there's got to be, you know, professional, semi-professional, there's got to be talent.
Yes.
And that has to be there. So there will be a percentage of young people that are really, really interested in music, and they turn up to all the rehearsals and they turn up to all their lessons. But actually, the reality is that they're never going to get beyond that grade 4. But there are some that come in and they fly. And before you know it, and we have there are a large number of Army cadets that are now in reserve and regular Army bands, making a living out of being a musician, and that's key. And bearing in mind within the music, I must sort of explain as well. We've got sort of the military band element, the wind band element. We've got corps of drums, so flutes and drums, very traditional from regiments. In there, we've got buglers from the rifle side of things, so that light division, if you like, element, and then we've got pipes and drums, mainly in Scotland, but we've got some down in England as well. So that covers quite a variety of music. That's the other thing as well, is we'll provide music from grassroots right the way through tradition, and that's instrument, that's music theory, and we do an element of general musicianship as well. So general knowledge, a bit of history, and also being a military style organisation. Someone called it a kids club the other day, which really made me laugh. But that military style sort of organisation, that we also provide what I call the green element, with a little bit of
weapon handling and
field craft, first aid, AT, adventure training, and on top of that, that there are qualifications that they can gain as well. Something I'm doing at the moment that's not been there at the moment is trying to align the ABRSM grade system with our own star system, so that they can do both exams at the same time. They come away with an ABRSM certificate as well. So I think that answers the question.
I think it absolutely does. So if anybody wanted to join, or if there's somebody listening that think the kid might want to be a part of this, how do they get in touch?
So the best and easiest way is online. Go to the armycadets.co.uk website, and you'll see on there it says how to join. Click on that, takes you down. That'll then ask you to put in your postcode, and it'll bring up all the units that are close to you. If you want to be a musician, there is a box there that says if you only want to see the musical units, you can click on that. Only those ones will come up. It's all online. It's an online system, and then someone will get back to you at some point from that detachment. And go from there. So it's all pretty simple, but not many people know it. That's the sad thing, and that's a part of the reason for you and I chat today as well.
Absolutely,
to put that out there as well.
Absolutely, and part of the whole thing with our ethos within Music Kids is inspiring young minds through music. It's not necessarily to, I will always say, I don't necessarily want the kids that I teach to become professional musicians. One or two might. I think one, my entire time of doing it, works in London as a session musician, and he's absolutely awesome. But it's the fact that we're giving them the experience. The cadets, what an experience to do AT, adventure training. What an experience to do that field craft. So if they only get to a grade 4 level, does it matter really? You're
you're absolutely right. I think that's why we talk about the cadet experience. It is the full package. It's about taking a young 12-year-old and assuming they go through the whole experience and they come out at 18, that they then are a rounded young adults ready to go into the big wide world, if you like. Even if they don't join the military, even if they're not a musician, they've got life skills that takes them forward. And there are a lot of transferable skills from being a musician to into the sort of the commerce world, if you like, or the big wide world elsewhere in terms of work. And just being a good human being.
Absolutely, it'd be a nice place to be, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Moving on then from the cadets, then so let's say they go through the cadets from 12 to 18, then they join the army. Now, and I think you know where I'm leading with this, they're now at a public funded organisation. Music, we've already discussed, and it's becoming, for want of a better way of putting it, less relevant in our primary schools and even our secondary schools. How then do you justify a public funded organisation in the armed forces that holds, and I hate to say this, it makes my skin crawl to say it, holds no value musically to the wider organisation from the public perspective?
I think that's really interesting. It's a really interesting question, because I very much separate music and monetary worth. You could argue that over all the years where funding has been removed, that this is just payment for what's actually what their parents and their families, and guardians and the like, have invested in them to get them to that point. You could argue that. In terms of what do they give back? Right across the country and internationally, British bands are revered. Revered as being the very best at what they do.
Yeah.
There are some incredible bands elsewhere, but in terms of how we are viewed, there are we are revered at what we do. What that brings in terms, if you want, in terms of financially, in terms of putting back into the purse, because in effect the question is asking what does music take out of the purse.
Yes.
But if we talk about what it puts back into the purse, if there were no bands in London, for instance, nobody would go to see the Change of the Guard.
True though.
Trip in the Colour would be a very boring parade.
Yes, yes.
The state and ceremonial scene, wouldn't exist.
We are the best at this. We are the best at ceremony.
And that is UK PLC.
Yeah. Yes.
So when you consider that as an investment, I think if you were to put it into monetary terms, and I don't like to do that, but if you were, one pays the other, if that makes sense. So I think never take away that there's a great deal that musicians do internally for the army for itself. In terms of the parades that they fulfil, the non-musical roles they fulfil.
Yes.
And a musician in the army is more than just a musician as well. We have media gurus. We have recruitment gurus. We have people that run the music libraries. There's so much more to it. So there's a greater set of skills than just music. So I think in terms of what they put back in, we've got musicians at training establishments, in phase 1 training establishments, who are teaching young soldiers, not just musicians but young soldiers when they first join the army.
Of course we have. Yes.
We've got them at phase 2 where they are going into their initial trade training.
Yes.
So we're training our own musicians. So that's putting money back into the purse, if you like.
Yes.
So I in terms of justification, I don't like justification from a purely financial point of view, but I think as much as bands take out of the purse, I think they hugely put back into it.
Excellent. Moving on to you then, sir, if we may.
Yeah.
Now we've discussed when we travel a lot. We're in a lucky position where we can. We're off to Madrid soon.
We are.
But when we were in Cyprus, we talked about your upcoming book.
Yeah.
And so it's what I find difficult is the context of the book. It's not something the interesting conversation. I mean, I brought it up again last night. Interesting conversation. I don't suffer with imposter syndrome, and that's essentially what the book is about. And then your response last time was, no, only successful people suffer with imposter syndrome.
That's not actually true, and a bit of a cheap jibe. So I am writing a book.
Have you got a title yet?
A working title of The Imposter in Me.
Yeah.
That's the working title. It actually started out as I was going to write a book on positivity. Because I am quite a positive person.
You are.
I very much cup half full.
Yeah.
Generally, my outlook on life is quite positive. But over the years, I have been crippled is too strong a word, but I've found myself in positions where I've really doubted my own ability, I suppose, and I've needed that secondary confidence level from elsewhere. And it's not, I think you can get very bogged down in what's positive, how can you be positive if you have this sort of syndrome, this imposter syndrome. And actually the two aren't linked. Because, and the reason that I jokingly say about successful, there are many very successful people who have suffered And it's not something. So imposter syndrome is not necessarily something you have all the time.
No, okay.
It's not something that necessarily that sits with you in your daily life. It could just be in certain times. You know, I can remember going into a pretty important meeting. I'd done all of my prep. I was all ready to go. I got in there, and I was fairly comprehensively slapped down over the first sort of issue. And that was it. I was shot to pieces at that point.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I completely did not believe that actually I should even be in that meeting. That it was right for me to be in the meeting. That I was qualified to be in the meeting. All these things going on in my head, and it gripped me at that point. And there are ways and means of dealing with it. And I think that for me, there is I have a lot of natural ways of dealing with things. You know. But yeah, it's something that I've looked back over my career. It hasn't defined me in any way, which I think is a good thing because some people can be defined by it. But yeah, I've questioned many times.
Yeah.
You know, I one of the areas where it really comes out in me, and you'll probably smile at this, but I love performing. I love being in front of a band. I love conducting. I love talking to an audience.
Yeah.
But the minute I step off that stage and I get in my car and I drive home, I go back through the whole thing.
Yes.
How did it go? Well, that could have been better. I could have done that better. Why didn't I do that? I get to the point I start berating myself a bit, even though actually what it was a fantastic concert.
Yes.
And the audience stood at the end, gave a standing ovation, went home exceptionally happy, really enjoyed the evening. And yet for me, by the time I've got home, I've got to the point where I'm almost only seeing the negative to the concert and how I can put that all right. And that's a shame in some ways.
Is that not a crossover kind of perfectionism, and it as well, and which a lot of musicians have?
Of course, absolutely. And I would be surprised if you were to speak to a lot of musicians and they don't say that they suffer with an element of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
There is a difference between wanting to better yourself.
Yeah.
And berating yourself.
Yes.
If you like. It's really interesting. For many years, the interesting side of performance is that I think in a performance you can almost train yourself to be someone else when you're performing. You become this character.
Yeah.
Bruce Forsyth used to have this wonderful tick, and anybody that remembers Bruce Forsyth will remember when he came out onto stage or wherever he was, he had a little skip as he came out.
He did, yeah.
And I once heard him interviewed, and he spoke about that skip. And that skip was the point where he turned from Bruce, the father, the husband, the grandfather, into Bruce the entertainer. And he was able to switch that, and that was him there. And that was that little skip.
Yes.
And I think in performance, I can do an element of that. The minute I walk out, this is James, the performer, the conductor, the sort of the orator, but actually when you step out of that, you go back to being you, and that questioning for me just can take over.
Yes.
And that becomes quite a negative, rather than it being a positive in the fact that you take that and develop it, which I have done over the years. But for that point, it can create a very negative return on what's been a very positive experience. Does that make sense?
It does, and it affects the rest of your family and loved ones. You've recently become a grandfather.
I have, yes.
Yes, is that your first grandchild?
It is my first grandchild.
Yes.
Yeah. He is. Where are we now? Tuesday. He's 2 days or 3 weeks old. So yes, yeah. And does it affect that? Does it affect that? That's a really good question. I suppose it could do.
Yeah, it
could do, and affect family life. My wife's always been a very great support.
Of not just you, of everyone around you as well. Meryl, yeah.
She's a great listener.
Yeah,
she's had to be over the years, especially if she's sat in the car after a concert, and we debrief all the way home. She's really good at just sitting there going, you've got this. You absolutely got this. And sometimes, and more often than not, it's completely irrational. Have you got the skill set to do this? Yeah, of course you have.
Yeah.
Have you got the knowledge base here? Absolutely, in spades.
Yes.
So why doubt? Why put that whole that whole process in place? And it's just an internal part of me, I suppose, as a person. But the part going back to sort of the book really is twofold. Part of it is for me to put it down on paper. It's a little bit sort of cathartic, I suppose, in a sense. And part of it is for people to read it and go, do you know what, that's me?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe take from it that they're not on their own, because that can be a real thing with imposter syndrome. That, know that there are a lot of people out there that suffer with elements of it, and actually maybe to just give ways in which I've taught myself to just deal with it.
Yes. Yeah.
The other thing that comes with, and this is really interesting, a lot of people don't realise it comes with imposter syndrome, is procrastination is a big issue with imposter syndrome, because when you tell yourself you can't do something, then you procrastinate around doing things. And I am one of the world's greatest.
Oh, I'm brilliant at it. And in the business world, we call it a fear of success, which is more crippling than fear of failure a lot of the time. So in our world, when we're running a business, we call it the fear of success. And it's and because to be successful, we aren't successful people. Bruce Forsyth is a successful person, and you've got Alan Sugar, that's a successful businessman. And so for it to get to that sort of level, it takes real drive and push, and it does take more than just yourself to do that, like you touched on earlier as well.
Yeah, absolutely, no, completely. And it's that. I suppose where you're saying there, the self-doubt element is the difficult part. As I said right at the beginning, I am actually quite a very positive person.
Yes.
My outlook on life is very positive.
Yeah.
So when you throw a bit of self-doubt in, it does quite take you back.
Yes.
It sort of knocks you back a bit and makes you think, oh, hang on, well, stop, stop. And that can happen for a second.
Yes.
It can happen for 5 minutes. It can happen for days, where you just knocked yourself back so much that you've gone, no, hang on, well, stop, I've got to pick myself up. Find that positivity again. And I think the positive book is still within me, but but it's changed at the moment. Around the imposter syndrome, it's a fascinating subject, and one the more I read up about, and the more I talk to people about, the more people say to me, "Wow, yeah, I think I think I might have a bit of that."
Elements of that
that sit with me. Procrastination is a classic. It's an absolute classic part of that imposter syndrome, where you just don't think you have the skill set, you have the knowledge base to actually do something, so you don't do it, and then you do it and you think, what was all the problem? What was
absolutely, yeah. And so what are you hoping that the reader will pick up from this book? Is it an awareness, or is it a dealing mechanism, or both?
I think it's a bit of both, really. And it's a bit of just my story as well with it.
Yes.
In essence, I always think we talked about this previously, but that element of putting the personal into it, I think is exciting to a reader.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, if they can relate, and that to someone, it's a bit like. Talking to an audience, I always say that if an audience can go away feeling like they know me a little bit better than when they got there, then I've succeeded in essence. And a book is the same. I think I want people to that little bit understand who I am, what I've done, where I've been, all that sort of thing. How I've found myself to be affected, I think is the best way of putting it, by imposter syndrome at times.
Yes.
And then how I have used certain strategies that have helped me to go forward. Because without showing off in any way, sense, or being sort of a little bit robust about it, I suppose. I was successful in what I did in terms of regular army, and still now as and working for the Army Cadets Charitable Trust. but it's understanding what that is, as I did say, you will be amazed at the people that are successful, which are the reason I say that is they're the people that you would least expect to suffer from imposter syndrome. You don't have to be successful to suffer with it.
No.
Funny enough, if there was someone that's not successful, it'll have a greater effect on them, I suppose. You could argue.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Of course. And it's going back to what you said. Humans love story.
Yeah.
From the days of ancient text, we've been a storyteller. We're all, in all capacity, we love stories being told from one to the other. And so, absolutely, if you can put elements of yourself. So, if there's anybody out there that has a desire to become a director of music or desire to be successful in any sense, then do absolutely give some of yourself, or everything of yourself in that, but expect to be knocked back.
Yes.
Because people, when you say all of a sudden, I'm going to do this, the human nature is to protect you and go, oh no, don't do that. Look after yourself. Don't do that. You're going to fail. And so you've got to expect that. And so I suppose that's not going to help with the imposter syndrome or this negativity and the procrastination.
Yeah.
The safe space is to follow the herd.
And that's a part of putting myself on the table, I suppose, in a sense, is that there could be there are two elements to this. It could be cathartic. But it could also, it could also lead on to the second book, couldn't it?
Yes.
With everything that's fed back.
That's right.
In essence, right. And I'm not trying to write a series of books, but you know what I mean. Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, I am opening myself up. But the greater hope is that there will be enough people out there that will look at this and go, do you know what? Actually, I can take something from this, and it's going to help me. Maybe just in doing the most simplest of tasks that I've struggled with, or just put off.
Of course, yes, yeah. Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
Good luck with your book, and I'll read it, and then I'll be absolutely honest with my feedback. I
promise. Maybe I'll give it to you to proofread.
Oh my god. So looking at the long career that you've had, and this is the first podcast that's going out, but I've spoken to an ex-convict who in prison said music saved him. And then, so I've spoken to him. That's going to be a future release in about a week's time. I've got a vicar that is suffered chronically with depression, and music saved him. And then it's in a few months' time, I'm going to drop this one in. I've got a very famous author who failed at music, but music saved him.
Yeah.
So looking back at your career, how do you see music in the future? Specifically, I suppose, with army music, within the British Army. But where do you see it going?
I'm going to change that slightly if I may. Just from the point of view, I really engage and empathise with people that find music that has saved them, and really how that has been made such a big impact on their life that it's given them hope. I suppose is the best way of looking at it. And I think for me, I've not had that epiphany, if you like, with music, but I do sometimes look and think, if I hadn't had music in my life, what would I have done? And I have absolutely no idea, because music has been my life.
Yeah.
So it hasn't saved me, but it has been my life and my life's work, and it will continue to be until the day I fall off this mortal coil, sort of thing. Music is intrinsically in me. Mm-hmm. It's in my soul. It's in my heart. So in terms of saved isn't the right word for me, but actually it plays such a big part in my life that you could say music is me. Mm-hmm. And that sounds a little bit corny, but you know what I mean. I've forgotten the question now. Where
do you see music going within the core of army music, more specifically, with the career that you've had?
Yeah. So as with all these things, as we living in a very difficult financial world, and the country is in a difficult financial way, I don't see music or the arts being supported greatly any more than it is now.
It's true, because it is all art. It's dance and it's
Yes.
drama and
Yeah.
it's all those other performing arts.
I don't see that changing.
No.
So I suppose I would argue that, you know, the job I'm doing now, where we're providing free music tuition to young people, is going to play a bigger part going forward, and needs to play a bigger part going forward. In terms of music within the military, it's very easy, as we know, outside of the military, to look at music as being the first thing, as a nicety, let's just say. And to a degree it is. And I wouldn't argue necessarily against that. But it does bring a lot in for our country. My hope is that we can stabilise music within the military, and that we will keep it, you know, keep the traditions, keep music very much alive within the military, the army in particular, because I wholeheartedly believe that a military without music will be much the poorer place.
I agree.
Much the poorer place, and it would be a sad day.
Yes.
Having said that, you and I, we are currently reservists,
Yes.
part-time musicians, and if you go back in history, prior to regular army bands, essentially they were part-time musicians that were brought in to play, military music.
Yeah. Okay.
So you could argue we're about to go
Full circle.
We couldn't, or we're about to go, but we could go full circle.
Yes. Okay.
And find ourselves in that position. I'm not saying that's the way it's going to go in any way, shape, or form, because we're nowhere near that point. But you know, reductions in funding of the MOD, reductions in music because of that point, difficulties in recruiting are all current issues that our current musicians, senior musicians, are dealing with it, and it's a tough one. It is a real tough one. Where does the future lie? I truly hope the future has military music in it.
Yes.
I worry long term, maybe not in my lifetime, but long term, that might disappear.
Oh yeah. Well, that would be a horrible day.
It will be a very sad day.
And the last one then, inspiring young minds through music, is as if there was a young 16-year-old that was wanting to join the Corps of Army Music, or was wanting to join the Army and take up music as a career. What would you say to your 16-year-old self? Is essentially the question I'm asking.
That's a difficult one. I suppose, at 16 I knew what I was going to do, and I was joining the army as a musician at that point. I suppose if I would look back, in some ways you're asking me would I change anything? The simple answer to that is no. I wouldn't. My advice to any young musician that is considering army music as a career choice, it would be that there is a great deal to get out of a career within army music, not just the music, but beyond the whole experience. Take every opportunity that comes your way. Work hard at your music, because you don't become good and stay good. You don't become great and stay great. You don't become outstanding and stay outstanding. No. And that's not just music, that's in every field. You've got to work at it. Yeah. You've got to really work hard at it. And you've got to put the time and effort in to be that great musician. The rewards are massive.
Yeah.
The personal rewards are huge, just from performance elements. The military, the travel that you can do, the friends you make, the sport, the adventure training, all of those are lifelong experiences. And I talk about the cadet experience that we create for these 12 to 18-year-olds. But actually, the experience of being a military musician for a number of years, whatever you choose to be. For me, it was 34 years as a regular army musician, and now as a reserve musician as well. The experience that I've had is second to none. And if I would say to any young person, if they have half the experience and get half the joy that I got in my 34-year career, they can have a great time.
Brilliant. Captain Marshall, thank you very much for speaking to me.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Just for the listener, we did all that in one take. I find that amazing. So thank you very much, and I will hopefully be speaking to you on this couch again.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks very much.
Thank you.